Welcome to the Cities Podcast, powered by the Business Journal's Leadership Trust. Each episode on Cities looks at a particular topic, challenge, trend, or political situation through the lens of local markets. Our contributors are members of a Business Journal's Leadership Trust.
Hey everyone, this is Stephen Ganoza. This is our third episode in a series called The Inequality Dilemma, where we look at what's causing income and wealth disparity, particularly in major cities, and what can be done to bridge the gaps. Today, we have my interview with Todd Marks. Todd is the CEO of Mindgrub and a member of the Baltimore Business Journal Leadership Trust. He'll discuss the work that Mindgrub does to bridge the digital divide, how the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted this inequality, and why we need to have a government that prioritizes big goals and takes bold action. In addition, Todd also serves as the chairman of the Maryland Tech Council and is a member of the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore Board of Directors, the Northeastern Maryland Technology Council Board of Directors, the City of Baltimore Smart City Council, and the Loyola University MBA Program Advisory Board. Todd, you're a busy guy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
You know, we've got a lot of ground to cover, and in particular, we want to discuss your work around bringing awareness to and helping to bridge the gap when it comes to what you call digital inequality. But before we get there, let's just introduce you to everyone. Tell us a little bit about you, what Mindgrub does, and the work that you do.
Great, yeah, as you mentioned, Todd Marks, father of a big family of 9 with 7 kids. I started Mindgrub because I started to have a third kid and needed to make a little bit more than I did as a high school teacher back in the day. But Mindgrub largely started in about 2002, 2001 after September 11. I worked as an independent contractor for a while, and then in 2008 when the iPhone came out and they released the SDK, it was another major turning point in the history of Mindgrub and my career. And I started hiring at that point. It was also what was the biggest recession of our lifetimes. Very disruptive time to grow a company, but it helped, really accelerate the business. And then now, only to be disrupted by the next biggest disruption the biggest disruption of our lifetimes with COVID. Mindgrub, once again, is absolutely taking off. That said, I'm also in a great place in my life, a little older, a little more established as a businessman now, and I'm able to devote my time toward other community needs.
Yeah. So we want to get to those community needs. And wow, in addition to all those positions, you have 9 kids.
7 kids, my wife and I. So okay. Family of 9. Yes.
Family of 9. Oh, you are a busy man. So you mentioned that you were a teacher, but now you're running this. It sounds like a lot of the work you're doing, you're never really losing touch with like the community or whatnot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mindgrub happened to have hired a number of educators, and we're very much involved in a lot of education programs. But beyond that, it's just community in general. Like teachers are representative of our community, right? They are shaping the minds of our community. Very, very powerful. Probably one of the most powerful, important careers and roles in a community of all time. That being the case, we've always been educators, but we are now kind of expanding beyond that scope and really being community leaders. And in Baltimore, where our headquarters is, has always been a challenged community. And so there is a lot of people stepping it up to help solve the problems in Baltimore. Now, the thing that's interesting is I think now we're starting to coalesce around the idea as business leaders to get change happening. I think that's starting to happen a lot more. There's, Hack Baltimore programs by one of our friend competitors is really taking the charge on that. There's now a digital transformation action committee, or I think it's a digital quality action committee in Baltimore. So there's just a number of things that are starting to happen. But Baltimore is one of many trying to do our part for the city. And specifically, we're great technologists. So when it comes to the digital divide, digital inequality, and digital transformation, that's where we're certainly offering up a lot of help and assistance.
Yeah. So let's talk about this idea of digital inequality. You wrote about this recently in the Baltimore Sun. But before we get into the weeds about what you guys are doing and stuff, let's define that term, right? Like, what do you mean by digital inequality?
Yeah, absolutely. So we hopefully all know what inequality is, right? And it's not treating two people the same. Digital inequality is no different. It just happens to do with digital means. And a lot of times we're talking about access to broadband, for instance, access to electronics and computers, right? And it is not the same. It is not equal right now. There are places in Baltimore, there's, I think, about 30% of Baltimore's population that does not have access to broadband. There was about 35% of our inner city kids that not only did they not have access to broadband, they didn't have computers in the home. So you look at education, right? And as soon as our governor and many other governors declared shelter in place orders, it meant we could not go to school. My 7 kids have 2 to 3 internet connected devices at their disposal that they can join class. But yet there was that 30% of our population in the city that as soon as they said shelter in place, they're hosed. In a lot of cases, they don't have access to food. There's food deserts, right? There isn't a lot of transportation. They might have one parent in the household. And then on top of that, they have no access to internet, no computers. So they were literally just stranded. Now, I shouldn't say they were stranded because the school system stepped it up. They continue to offer their free lunch programs. They were one of the first businesses to have curbside pickup, right? So families could walk to the elementary schools, and elementary schools are everywhere, right? High schools are a little more far, but you could walk to your local elementary school and you could still get food. And that's really important because there's a lot of people that just can't even eat, right? And I'm not going to solve that problem for the world, but I am going to help out really putting a focus on digital inequality. So there were a number of programs. We gave away laptops. We try to get laptops in everyone's hands. But beyond that, we need to look at big picture. And it used to be that people had candles in their houses, and then at some point they had, generators, whether it was from a river. They didn't have solar back then, but then we finally ran electricity, right? And it wasn't university run everywhere, right? It was only where it was practical because energy is still privatized a lot of times. But the government was really good to provide right-of-ways, through municipalities so that energy companies could run energy. And it happens to have good margins. There was still some infrastructure, but the economic model made sense that everybody got energy. Water, not as much. You don't see as much privatization of water. That's something that the government happens to do most of the distribution of water. Needless to say, internet connectivity is one of those things that needs to be in every household. It needs to be like water, electric, and septic, period. Right now, it's a private sector game, so it has to be economically viable for them to run the internet. And right now, the government does some things really well, and some things are slow at. What they do really well is allowing for right-of-ways. Private sector companies can't do that. They have to leverage the government to do that. So the government needs to be able to map out all the areas to provide access, whether it's through sewage, across buildings, from 5G on light posts, right? That's what government absolutely needs to do. They're best positioned to get that done. If they can do that, then the private companies will have a better chance running it. Now, it still has to be economically feasible. And so that's the other thing government has to do, is they have to subsidize the cost. We know the outcome is that everybody needs broadband, whether it's actual coaxial, fiber, 5G, they all need it yesterday. The broadband companies, like in Baltimore, Comcast has not quite an exclusive agreement, but they have a monopoly to be able to provide that. It's not necessarily economically feasible for them to do it. So they need to get a private-public partnership together with the outcome of getting broadband in everybody's homes by the end of the year. The government needs to subsidize that however they can or need to. They need to provide the right-of-way where they need to. And then ultimately, a Comcast or a Verizon, the other big one, needs to make it happen. And that's where I think Mindgrub helps. Beyond just being passionate about our community and being educators, being amazing technologists, but we also we do a lot of software development and marketing. We both use agile software development and agile marketing. And agile is the way that it works is you always know your priorities. You always know the highest priority, and that's the thing you're working on at the time. And every day you're meeting and you're saying, this is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm doing tomorrow, here's my blockers for success, and I'm still continuing to work on the highest priority. And every 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever your ceremony is for your backlog grooming, you reestablish what your highest priorities are, and everyone works on that for the next couple of weeks. We seem to have like 4-year priorities. They happen to work in political cycles. They don't get them done because they work 2 years to build a team, 2 years that they start politicking for the next election, right? And generally, those very important things are challenged. That said, we're still doing a generally a good job in the United States. I think we could do better.
So let me run with this agile idea about focusing on the priorities, right? So bringing it back to digital inequality. The pandemic has certainly maybe made it more apparent that there's digital inequality, right? Specifically through the school system. But pre-pandemic, maybe it wasn't the top priority, right? Or so what should have been done? What was missed before COVID even happened that allowed us to get to where we are?
Right, enlightenment, right? So a lot of things, just came to head because of this. And I don't know, it was maybe Teddy Roosevelt or something that said, never miss on an opportunity to capitalize on crisis or something. I'm totally butchering the quote and who said it.
Yeah, everybody's been throwing that quote around. I don't know who said it either.
I have no idea, but this is a crisis and we should capitalize, right? So you mentioned an article in the Sun that I wrote, and that was redlining of access to broadband. And Baltimore had a real bad history with redlining, which was literally block for block going to banks and saying, these people are a good bet, give them loans. These people are not a good bet, do not give them loans. And that was redlining. And they literally drew lines block for block to say these people are high risk or low risk. And we had our issues with credit default swaps and everything too. But by owning a home, you build up equity. So I own my home, my primary home. I was able to leverage that equity to get my first line of credit for my business. I grew my business. I was able to leverage that equity to get a cabinet. I was able to leverage that equity to buy a new restaurant that we've turned into an incubator, right? And all it was just an asset that I could then tell the bank, fine, if I don't honor this new contract with you to pay back your money, you can take my asset. That's all it was. They never took my asset. They never had to. They never had to tap it. I've always been, really responsible. But the fact that I had the asset, I now have cabins and restaurants and, a bunch of businesses and stuff because I bought my home 20 years ago, right? Beyond that, 22, 23 years ago. I don't know. I bought it right away. Graduated college, bought a house. Well, so redlining back in the day didn't allow people to buy houses and build up any equity, so they had no asset that they could leverage to then parlay that into growing a business or buying other property or you name it. Broadband, same thing. I have no access to the internet. I can't leverage that to parlay into a new career, right? And so I wrote about this a year and a half ago that it was going to be a major problem long term. Well, now, because of COVID, that problem did get exacerbated. So as soon as school said, go home and learn from school, we said, people don't have broadband. They don't have computers in the home. We all knew this, but we kind of tucked it under the rug. It wasn't an issue. As soon as we sent all the kids home from school, we're like, wait a second. There's a lot of people that won't be able to get to their assignments. What do we do? Right? We knew about this problem, but it was the crisis that really shined just a blazing spotlight on it. And therefore, there was a ton of action in the city. Tons of businesses. We were all donating computers. They took $3 million in city funding from a children's program and used that to accelerate getting broadband into the homes of the students that didn't have access to the internet and purchasing computers and getting computers. $3 million does buy a lot of computers. And we had the funding, we had the need, but crisis is something to capitalize on. And inequality has absolutely had a big spotlight shined on it. Our unemployment systems were really challenged with the surge of unemployment claims that came through. And yet, there are these privatized companies that said, you got a car? We got a job for you, right? And so anybody with access to a vehicle could easily become Uber Eats, Instacart, right? And so they got jobs right away, and they're actually decent jobs, and they pay, pretty good, all things considered. The issue, however, though, is they are on the front lines, and they're the ones going in the grocery store. The lower socioeconomic, and in different cities, that takes on a different form. In Baltimore, it is predominantly African American and Latino. They are the ones on the front lines delivering groceries, putting themselves at risk. And so now going all the way back, so there is a health crisis. Not just the fact that not everybody has health insurance, but on top of that, one more time, our minorities and lower socioeconomic are getting smacked down just simply because they're just trying to work. And there is a further divide. There is, we haven't had class structures around here. I'm worried about, we're getting class structures now. We got those the knowledge workers sitting at home with unaffected paychecks. And then we have the lower socioeconomic class running around, putting themselves at risk to bring me my food, right? And it's terrible. I feel like we hit some sort of class thing. And so we're doing what we can. I mean, we need to solve this as a community going full circle now. It's not something I can solve. It's something community needs to solve. And it's across those fronts: transportation, health, education, workforce, and then ultimately crime, right? That we need to have a heck of a lot more equality, because as the world gets faster and as things like pandemics occur, I'm really worried that we will have further inequality and we will go back to a class-based society, which was never good.
So maybe you should add mayor to the list of your accolades there. So digital inequality then is sort of just the latest symptom of inequality that's been around for some time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Inequality's been around forever.
Let's focus on this idea of you're a knowledge worker, you're wired for high-speed internet, you can keep chugging along. Other people who don't have access to the internet are sort of cut off and have to do these sort of high-risk jobs, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is much bigger than simply wiring their house with broadband, right? So what about like skills retraining and sort of workforce development? Because we can give people Wi-Fi, but like you need to be able to do something.
Yeah, you got it. And right, it's not just Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is one of many things that they need. Actually, one of our clients called Catalyte, actually they have kind of a brilliant business model. They're not unlike Mindgrub in that they're putting teams of knowledge workers together for clients to do software, to do DevOps, to do IT, project management, you name it. The difference is they're literally pulling people off the street and getting them into those careers. And Mindgrub, like I like to say, I'll hire anybody. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to have formal education. You just need the skills to do the work at Mindgrub. That said, we generally are hiring people with full computer science degrees or 4-year art degrees, because that's where they get the skills. We do have plenty of people that kind of went to the school of hard knocks and didn't go to formal education, but somewhere they did an internship or a work study, they got the careers. 4 or 5 years later, they got the skills, they were able to hired at Mindgrub without a degree. That said, they weren't a musician yesterday and never wrote a lick of code, right? Well, that is what Catalyte was doing, is that they realized that musicians, their brain is wired for computer science. They just haven't had the exposure to it. Because if you think about music and basically like lines of code at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's like structured creativity. There's a parallel there. Yeah.
It's very much parallel. So what they do is they set up AI. First they have testing and they test people. And they found musicians, for instance, make good computer scientists. So they test them and then they get them into a program. I think they actually pay them while they're learning, if I'm not mistaken. And then they place them at a client location. And then, I think in the beginning they subcontract them. Then eventually they get hired. And so they make their money. All of that said, they just started a new program called Retrain America. So they've been doing this. They've grown to several hundred employees. They've taken on some funding. They've gotten some scale. But again, they realized one company can't do it alone. So they added dozens of partners. Mindgrub's one of those partners where we've all agreed we will provide an environment, a career changer who otherwise had not been in IT or DevOps or computer science, a career changer in completely disparate careers, to get trained through a work-study program to have a career. So in Baltimore, and I say this statistic too all the time, and I think it's for maybe shock value. Somebody who's going to have to see if this is true or not. I believe we have more job openings than we have unemployed persons. Now that probably changed right now. Let me go back. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, that was probably the case. Yeah, pre-pandemic, we have such a surge of knowledge work. We're one of the hot spots for cyber. NSA's in Baltimore's backyard. It's basically in the next county over. We have DoD community really rich through DC. It's a race right now between the maglev and the Hyperloop to go connect DC to Baltimore, which is going to be amazing for us. But we have tons and tons of innovation and knowledge work happening in our area, tons and tons of job openings. And pre-pandemic, I believe more openings than unemployed. It is absolutely the skills gap, which is the problem.
So it's really, accessibility, access to the technology is one thing. The skills retraining is another big part of it, right? Put those together, maybe we can start bridging the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, all of the above. So get them broadband, get them skills training, get them transportation, right? So it is all of these things need to come together. And I feel bad. There's a lot of people that are just drowning right now. And certainly if you don't have broadband, it's a non-starter, right? We have to get everybody access to, proper health care, everybody access to transportation. So if you do all of those things right, then in theory, we could actually propel some of those parts of our community that were left behind. I mean, you look at broadband access, you look at like sub-Saharan Africa, who they didn't even have, there are no wires, there's not even walls in a lot of cases, right? So they couldn't run wires. Like United States, we ran so many wires for internet connectivity, right? Most people, not most now, but I think, a third of people are still using DSL, which is basically a phone line. So you have to run a hard line to get access to the internet. Sub-Saharan Africa, they created a Moto Mesh network to provide, now 5G is starting to be leveraged, but back at the time it was probably, 1G or 2G or something, 3G. But they provided broadband DSL equivalents with no wires in a fraction of the time in an area that otherwise had none of this infrastructure.
How did they do that, for anybody who doesn't know, without wires?
Yeah, it's all with radio signals.
Okay.
Yeah, so it goes through the air. Yeah, like you look at cell phones, right? We're on a 4G network now. That's a radio signal that goes through the air to your cell phones. Now they have 5G, right? It's still a little bit of theoretical, but there are some communities that are starting to roll out 5G, and it is broadband. I mean, I think it's 5G is 100 plus megabytes down and up. I mean, it's bona fide broadband. And the issue is that right now it's the private sector companies that have all the technology and the municipalities that own all the right of way. And they just can't see eye to eye. The government thinks it should be entirely in their control to roll out 5G perhaps. The private companies say, well, we own all the technology now, so it's entirely within our purview to roll it out. But yet they need access to the telephone poles and buildings and stuff to be able to put the nodes up there to basically run 5G. So it is, and in the state of Maryland, we've created an action committee to be able to start to do that, which is really good. We can't get over our own way sometimes, right? I think the Republicans and the Democrats, they have their thing. They're going to the extremes.
Yeah.
I think we all want to come to the center a little bit more. Libertarians, people think are generally in the center, but they're not. They're just for small government and individual rights. They're not necessarily in the center of it all. And so I think there is a new party that's needed. I think our current two-party system is lost. They've gone to the extremes. Anyway, you mentioned mayor, and I have nothing to do with wanting to be a politician ever, but I love
it sounds like you're going to need to form a new party for your mayoral run.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's finding that middle ground between, we want a capitalist society to drive the innovation, but we need something else to sort of make it equitably
accessible for everybody, right?
And we want innovation. We want because innovation should be the leveler.
Right.
That's the thing that blows my mind is innovation. 5G, broadband that you don't have to run wires should be what levels the world. And yet it's not, because we don't have 5G. I think we need to draw just a grid system in every urban area, and we just make sure there's 5G receivers, in a grid system so everybody has it, equally. Anyway, I don't know. We all need to just get educated. I think that's why going, full circle, being a teacher is so important, because if we were all, granted, we all can't have, 150 plus IQs and, ubiquitous knowledge, but if we can really focus on education and get everybody to a certain level of understanding of how the world should work, which I see in the millennials and I see in the Gen Zs, that some of the theory that they're coming up with is really sound theory. They're missing some of the life experience and understanding of the way the world actually works to be practical and how to execute on that theory, which is why we're going to have to bring our generations together too, right? It's not just socioeconomic classes. This coming to the center, it's generational as well, right? We need to come to the center because you have the boomers, which, to their desires or not, they epitomize capitalism, big houses, big cars, right? And then you have the millennials, which is the next big population, and they actually do epitomize a lot more of a socialist society, right? Which is, like AOC, very much a socialist mindset, and she is very much firmly entrenched in the millennials. Good theory, but again, it'll stifle the innovation, because innovation, you look at the life. And so part of the chair of the Maryland Technology Council, we have two big boards. We have life sciences and we have technology. And you look at, let's talk crisis again, right? You look at finding a cure for COVID, vaccination, let's just say. It is taking a tremendous amount of money of the pharmaceutical companies to come up with a vaccination for COVID. A tremendous amount of money to do it, time and money. And then they're finally going to do it. They're finally going to come out with a vaccination. And what the socialists are saying is that, and it's not even socialist, because socialists we attribute to communist governments and stuff. What the non-capitalists are saying is that as soon as we have a vaccination, we should just give it away to everybody for free. No money exchanges hands. It sounds great in theory. But what would be the incentive for that pharmaceutical company to invest millions and millions of dollars if as soon as they come up with something, they have to give it away for free? They're not. Right? They're not going to invest millions of dollars to then get nothing back. And that's the problem. And then if that were the case, then government needs to run everything, because government is the one person that can give everything away for free, because they can get money indirectly, right? They can just charge us all money in taxes, and then they can give things away for free. That's how government works. Government is terribly inefficient when it comes to innovation, period. Right? And I think government, sorry guys, I think you'd love to say, and government does have a lot of innovative sectors, and they can get it done in areas, but not universally. So we have to get this balance, because I would love to be able to give away vaccines for free to everybody in the world, but we still need to make that company whole that invested all of their millions. And the reason they do it is they do it for profit for the shareholders, right? That's how a business works. And so we need to be both pro-business and pro-community or pro-individual. We need to achieve both. You can still be a really successful business and still look out for people. And that is something that is part of our culture at Mindgrub. I happen to be, my young 40s. I'm an Xer. I happen to be trapped between the boomers and the millennials. And so I can think like a boomer and I can think like a millennial, and I'm taking the best of both, those groups as an Xer. And so I think as a business, we are trying to run the business in such a way that we're all about our employees and the individuals and the community, while still ultimately being profitable. And so what we had to do is we just had to go to kind of extreme transparency. So employees still want raises. And so we made budgets. We're transparent with our budgets. Everybody knows what numbers we need to hit every single day, every single month, so they get their increases. And so we put our budgets out there. We actually have a global operations dashboard that has every department's statistics, or not their data in there, and charts and graphs. Everybody can go in there. I do an overview as a CEO once a month to say, we just need to hit these numbers. That unlocks our increases, that unlocks our charity programs. We have committees. We have a philanthropy committee, which is run by our chief of staff. We have a cultural diversity committee. We have a remote working committee, and we have transparent finances. And we put budgets behind all these things. And we say, if you guys just hit this number, then we can give another $20,000 to $30,000 in charitable donations, which is what's really important to my millennials. And they would want to see that we are giving back to the community. They want to know that we are financially contributing to the community. But I have to connect those two. I have to connect the profitability of the company with our ability to give back. I have to make that transparent. So we've embraced both ideals. I opened up our finances. We're giving more money away than we ever did before. And yet now our EBITDA has been in the high teens. And we're actually having to temper that. Not by giving more away, but by encouraging people to take some downtime. Everyone, we went online. It's a crisis. We were set up beautifully for transparency. So everybody knew exactly how hard or not they had to work to maintain. We have this red line, green line. Red line keeps the lights on. Green line ensures everybody gets their increases annually, and we give back to the community, and we hit our giving goals.
What you're doing in your company is thematically the same thing that you're advocating for society, right? Like we can tackle these societal issues, these philanthropic goals, but we can only do it if there's a practical roadmap to get there, right?
Yeah, right. Go back to the roadmap. That's your roadmap as a business is your mission, vision, and values. If as a city, if as a state, if as a country, we can have a roadmap that's solid, that took all the key stakeholder inputs, we mapped it out, right? That's our BHAG, right? Your roadmap is your 5-year plan, your big, hairy, audacious goal, right? If you haven't read the book, The Rockefeller Habits, right? That's your 5-year, your 3-year, and your 1-year initiatives. Right? And political cycles are 4 years, right? And the BHAG you'd say was 5. I think it's 10 years, right? So you need a 10-year roadmap specifically so that it has to cross several election cycles. And so every decade, you should have a 10-year roadmap. It's 2020. We should have our community, state, regional, municipality, federal roadmap for the next 10 years that crosses over political cycles. And then we tune it back up in 2030. But it's not everlasting. It's not 10 years and it doesn't change. It's not an evergreen roadmap. You plot it out. You think, where do we want to be in 10 years? But then it changes daily using an agile methodology. So even though here's the outcomes of what we want to get to in 10 years, let's be broad. Let's just have equality in 10 years. We could do that.
Right.
If we really wanted to put our hearts to it, we could do that. We don't have to go through a couple more generations, right? And so let's make that the outcome we're trying to achieve in 10 years, and then think back 5 years, 3 years, and then what do we have to do this year? What are those steps? And then maybe in 10 years, we'll have some balance.
So we need agile government. There's another good term to start throwing around.
Agile government. That would be brilliant, right? Which, flies in the space of how government works. I mean, government, has been a bit of a jobs program, but we have to get over that. I mean, we have to know that we're a community. We have to support everybody in our community, and we don't have to give them some menial work just to make us feel better. We can do better. And so government does need to be smaller, but Stephen, I think you hit it on the head. Agile government. Somebody's got to have figured that. That I'm sure if we Googled that right now, that's a thing, right? But we actually need to do it. Yeah. It's the execution, right? It's not the idea that counts. It's the execution. Who's going to step up to the plate and create a balanced political system that leverages agile government?
Well, when you do finally wade into politics, if you need some help with the marketing communication, just reach out to me. I'll come help you out.
Yeah. No, I'll be on somebody's cabinet behind the scenes, I think. But yeah, I don't want to be the.
You don't want to be the front man, or
No, I don't want to be the front man.
Yeah.
Kissing the baby, shaking the hands.
No. Well, Todd, I mean, this was a great discussion, far wider ranging than I anticipated. So thank you for that. I do want to be cognizant of the time.
Yeah, I'm sure I only blew through one or two meetings now, but it's great. I mean, this stuff's really important. That's why I'm happy to take the time. Now we just need to, run with some of these theories and execute on them, and get some equality and order back in our lives.
So Todd, just real quick before we disconnect, where can people either learn more about you, Mindgrub, generally what can they do? How can they join the Balanced Party for a more agile government?
The Balanced Party for an agile government, right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so Mindgrub is mindgrub.com, and you can kind of learn about, most things we're up to right there.
Perfect. Todd, thank you so much for the time today and for a great discussion.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me again, Stephen.
For more on the inequality dilemma,
we need to stop saying no to housing, right? We need to be thoughtful about housing development and where we develop housing in our city. If projects come up or opportunities come up for bonds or other things that will help fund affordable housing development, we need to say yes.
check out our episode with Sherilyn Adams of Larkin Street Youth Services, where we discuss the invisible crisis of youth homelessness, the reasons it happens, and what San Francisco and other cities can do to help. Well, that's all we have for today. As always, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This has been the Cities Podcast, powered by the Business Journal's Leadership Trust. Please be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a member of Business Journal's Leadership Trust and would like to participate in our podcast series, please email your member concierge. If you're interested in joining a Business Journal's Leadership Trust, learn more at trust.bizjournals.com.